So as Janet sort of briefly said, over the last sort of 3 years, so starting, well, 4 years now, since 2017, we basically decided to start surveying our woodlands. So whilst we've been doing lots of good work, actually it's really nice to understand a bit more about, you know, what's been happening essentially. So basically what I'm going to do is run through some of the rationale for that. So why we've been doing that. And then a sort of an overview of some of the methods, and then having a look at some of the results, so what we found out over the last few years, and yeah, some of the sort of take-home messages from that. So in terms of the first slide, I'm just trying to rearrange my gallery view of all you lot so I can see what I'm saying. the difficulties of a Zoom presentation. So I think it's important that, I suppose, it's quite a nice reminder to sort of get back to what our mission is. What are we trying to do as a charity? So on our website it says we want to bring to life the story of how people and communities connected with the historical woodland and enable them to re-engage with trees and the natural environment. And the sort of more specific overview of description of our charity is the growing, planting and preservation of broadleaf trees in sympathetic locations in southwest England, and the education associated with these activities, especially to the disadvantaged. And so just as a reminder, I know you're fairly familiar with this, but I think it's a quite nice reminder for us. So how do we do this? So we advocate native woodland creation and restoration. So as the trustees were saying in their intros, you know, we do a lot of both behind the scenes work and in front of the scenes work, advocating native woodland in Devon, but then also more widely. But I think the real special thing about Moor Trees is we add that advocacy to actual action. We do stuff. So we work with local people to collect and process local provenance native tree seed. So we bring, lots of volunteers, and mostly it's volunteer hours that really make this happen. And we grow these trees on from seed, two tree nurseries. So I've just put a picture up here of one of the menial tasks of weeding, but important. And, you know, and watering trees. So there's a lot of hard work goes on in raising these trees. So I think we've got, hopefully, I think nod if I'm right, Adam, hopefully more than 20,000 trees this year, potentially, we're hoping for. Yeah, anyway, I'll take that as we're growing a lot of trees anyway. Yeah, and so as well as that, these native trees, we'll also design and plant native woodlands. So landowners get in touch with us, and we help plant their land with these trees. And we do it in all weathers. So you can see a great picture here of John walking around in the snow at Hillcrest. So, you know, it's very muddy, wet, often cold and damp work, but it's valuable. So why are we doing it? So this is the reason, you know, so this is the sort of why we put all that hard work in. It's for you know, this for native woodland, really. And you can see here, this is a great picture of Lamb's Down, which so this picture was taken about 10 years after planting, and you can see really quite dramatically the visual impact of planting trees. So yeah, it's for those people who sort of when we return to these woods, you can see the effects, but actually, so why survey? You know, isn't visually seeing it enough? And I would argue that actually having that evidence is really, really important for us as a charity. And there's sort of multiple reasons why. So firstly, evidence is our success. So in terms of so sort of like on a reputational basis, being able to show that our woodlands work, and when we plant a tree, is, you know, we're good at what we do essentially, and I think that's really important, particularly to prospective landowners, to other people, that we're good at what we do. So that's one reason. I think secondly as well, I think, and this is particularly important at the moment when tree planting is in the news, it's on the agenda. There's UK government targets for creating lots of woodland, is that we really understand the value of moor trees woodlands and native woodland more generally, you know, as opposed to monocultures of quick growing commercial species. That, you know, we can really point to the benefits of our woodlands and native woodland more generally. So I think it's really important that, and surveys allow us to do that, so we can have a bit more information. And thirdly, I suppose it's finding out what's happening really. So there's still quite a surprising little amount of evidence looking at the impact of understanding the impact of woodland establishment. And I think this is really important, particularly with, you know, you've got threats such as climate change that are creating quite big pressures on woodlands more widely. And, you know, the sites we're planting, they're the woodlands of the future. So it's really important that we have a handle on what's happening in the sites that we plant. Next point is actually to improve our methods. So, you know, none of us is perfect, and whilst we do really good stuff, actually, if we can find out more about our woodlands, and that enables us to improve our methods, then that's a really, really good thing. And lastly, to actually fulfill what we're set up as a charity to do. So that survey work both allows us to advocate more accurately and more successfully, hopefully, but also is part of what educating and informing others. So that's just a bit of a rationale about why it might, you know, I would say it's an obvious thing, but, you know, about why we decided to survey really. So the basic aim of the survey is just so like I said before, we started this about 3 or 4 years ago, just to get an idea of what's happening in our woodlands. So the basic aim was to understand what was the performance of the planted trees and the composition of the woodlands 10 years after planting. So 10 years after, we go back to the woodland and see how it's getting on. So we measured stuff like tree species, so what trees were planted, what trees were surviving, how big were they, which trees were coming in naturally, so which species were coming in naturally, which species of tree. And then we looked at stuff like ground flora. So how does that relate to, you know, were we seeing changes in flora? Were there ancient woodland indicators coming in? And then to get a bit of a handle on the sort of, to sort of contextualize the results, we also looked at stuff like soil type and slope angle and aspect to get an understanding of site-specific variables. So we did the surveys at six sites so far. So we had 2 sites each summer. So we had one survey on a Sunday. So we had 2 survey weekends each summer, and these were between 2017 2019. And like I said, all the sites were planted with by Moor Trees about 10-11 years ago, and they mix a range of sites. So you've got Wed Lake and Lambsdown, which are sort of Dartmoor fringe sites, near to Dartmoor, upland greater than 250 metres, and then you've got a range of lowland sites, including Coombarton, Courtgate Orchard, Sharpham, and then Middle Heltor, which is sort of somewhere in between really. So in terms of results, basically trees are doing brilliant. So we've got a 97% success rate. So actually we can show that, you know, we're good at it. So just comparing, you know, just thinking back to HS2, some of the trees that have gone in there, they've had success rates of 38% in some cases. So I think it may be an obvious thing that we're all aware how successful we are, but I think that's really important, that we know that we can grow native tree seed and we plant them and they're successful. So as well as being alive, they're also healthy. So there's, the fairly good, decent growth rate. So if you look at the graph on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see that this is the diameter at breast height, DBH, and basically you can see that. So these are the main species from all the that are present on all the sites, really. And you can see old is a really good performer, consistent good performer. Hawthorn is consistent, but not quite as high growth rate, which you would expect. And then interestingly, something quite interesting is going on with the birch and oak, where there's a big divide between the upland and lowland sites. So the birches and oak are doing quite a lot less, performing a lot less well in the upland sites. So that could be for multiple reasons, probably likely temperature, but it's definitely worth investigating why our planted trees are not doing so well at these sites. So I should just say these are planted trees; these are not natural regen. So also we looked at if we sort of recorded sites where there was ash dieback, and we did find some presence of ash dieback. So obviously, because they were planted 10 years ago, it's sort of this is we don't plant ash anymore, but obviously we can't remove the ash that we did have there. But we do find that only a very small proportion had ash dieback. So we're looking at about 2%. And it seemed to be the last year. So in 2019, it really became apparent. So before that, actually, we didn't really see it too much. But in 2019, it really seems to have taken hold on the sites. So as well as being successful, the planting schemes are also really diverse. So on our average, across the sites, we have an average of 13 different native tree species. And this is probably very conservative, because what I'm doing is I'm lumping in oak species, lumping in birch species, lumping in willow. So there'll actually be a lot more than that. So unfortunately, in the surveys, just due to the nature of the voluntary aspect of it, we made we stuck the trees into broad species classifications. But basically, the take-home picture is, we're the diversity of tree species is pretty good. So in terms of the planted trees, so what we find is the most numerous trees that we've actually planted were oak, ash second, birch and alder. So yeah, they were the most numerous trees. But in terms of natural establishment, we saw most of them were actually blackthorn, large amounts of ash, hazel and aspen as well. So quite a different mix, which is quite interesting. So I suppose that sort of related to that, and this is quite an interesting aspect of that. So on the left, you can see you've got a graph that shows you tree density. So that's in trees per hectare. And the blue bars are the natural colonization, ones that are coming in naturally. And the orange bar is the ones that have been planted. And you can see for the planted trees, there's still quite a reasonable amount of naturally colonizing trees. So in some sites, you've actually got more natural colonization occurring than planted trees. So this argument that there has to be a sort of a standoff between planting trees and natural colonization is sort of a false one, really. So there's a lot of talk from some corners in conservation that tree planting is not good, and in some ways, if done wrongly, it can be not beneficial. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't stop natural colonization happening. So if we look at the graph to the right, you can see the natural colonization proportion for each of the sites, and you can see that around 30% of all the trees in the woodlands are naturally colonizing trees. But interestingly, the sites like Wedlake, so if you look at Wedlake on the screen, it's a very it's a moorland site which has a small amount of seed source very nearby. So, and this basically shows that you've got a very small amount of trees naturally colonizing. So in these sites, actually, the planted trees make up the majority of the trees present there. And that's really important because when we think about diversity of species and making woodlands resilient to things such as climate change, having a diverse range of species is going to be crucial for this resilience. So what we see is that in terms of tree diversity, planting schemes add on average 5 tree species additional to those naturally colonizing, and that's really fantastic. If we are going to have resilient woodlands, then that's what we need. So if you look at this graph, you can see that Wedlake, you're seeing a massive increase, an increase in 9 species. So that's really good news. So as well as the tree side of it, and I'm keeping this very brief, so if you want some more information, then I can send you a report with a few more details. But we're also seeing big changes in woodland flora. So on the left, you can see Lambsdown. So this is when the last tree went in 2007. I think there's a young Brian there, which is nice to see. And you can see, it's essentially it's a closely cropped grass and sward with not much in the way of wildflower. I know we're winter here, but you've got very poor flora composition there. Whereas in fast forward 10 years, 2018, and it's a transformed site. You've got bluebells, it's spectacular. So it's, our surveys show that we're really transforming these sites in terms of floral composition. So we've seen lesser celandine, bluebell, pignut, primrose, wood speedwell, woodruff, dog's mercury, and dog's violet. So these are all ancient woodland indicators. So these are associated, they're real specialist floral woodlands. So within a quite quick period, we're seeing a shift in flora, and this is really important when it comes to the diversity associated with our woodlands. That the benefit that brings is happening really quickly. So as well as seeing a change in floral composition, we're also seeing a change in form as well. So this picture on the left is quite interesting. It's from Wedlake, and so Potentilla erecta, or tormentil with a common English name, is a plant you typically see scrabbling along the floor on the moorland. You'd think, hold on, why has it got a Latin name that's got erecta? It should be up. And it's only until these surveys and you see what its true form is when it is not absolutely grazed into non-existence that you realise why it's got its name. So this is a fantastic little, this is about 40 centimetres high mound of tormentil. So yeah, I think that's something that's really, really interesting, how like a form of familiar, what you think is a familiar plant is actually when you give it a chance, it's incredible what can happen. And I think we're only just starting to understand some of these things. So as well as the tormentil, we also see lots of other wildlife. And in Wedlake, we saw loads and loads of lichens, so fantastic lichens. So yeah, I mean, it was really, really brilliant experience just to survey and see what's around. So in terms of sort of a summary really of what the surveys show us. So they show us our schemes are really successful. So we've got 90% survival rate. So, we know how to grow trees, we know how to plant trees, and we do it well. But then 10 years following establishment, we find the establishment of naturally colonizing trees is a significant component of our woodlands. So, so this sort of yeah, this sort of relationship that we think that planting precludes or stops natural establishment happening is really false. Actually, they sort of work hand in hand, and actually what we're showing is that Moor Trees is almost like a startup kit for a woodland. You know, we're actually sort of we're putting in the foundations, and it's for nature to do the rest, really. And in terms of and the knock-on effect is that it increases diversity. So we show that actually by planting trees, we're increasing the resilience of these sites, and that's a really important message going forward with climate change and all the other anthropogenic pressures that are coming. And so, yeah, basically in 10 years, we can support, as well as sort of benefits in terms of tree species diversity, we're supporting specialist woodland flora, and that is invaluable for lots of other wildlife. So whilst we haven't captured it, the sort of range of diversity of species that we see in our woodlands in this survey, something that we'd really hope to sort of capture in future. But good news, basically. So what else does the survey show us? Actually, that it's a really enjoyable volunteer experience. So this is a picture from Sharpham in the sunshine on a nice sort of midsummer Devon day when it's not raining. Yeah, it was just a fantastic experience to do this, because I think one of the things that you find when you survey and you actually have to look and you have the time to look, and that is a really healthy thing, I think. Yeah, so it's I think, well, I speak to myself, but I know others who I've spoken to, actually, it's a really, really nice thing to do. It's a really sort of invaluable part of our calendar, really. And I think it's a sort of a good volunteer experience, as well as the wind and rain out on Dartmoor planting the trees. You actually come back and see what's going on, what the good we're doing. So in terms of next steps, so unfortunately we were unable to carry out survey this year due to COVID-19, so it's understandable, but hopefully we're going to continue with this next year. All things, fingers crossed, all things being well. But with that, so it's sort of a trial period, really. So the last 3 years we were sort of working out, you know, could we do it? You know, sort of the basics, really. But it'd be really nice if we could develop this protocol and have something perhaps a bit more rigorous and a bit more targeted. So we did find that, you know, obviously volunteers surveys aren't perfect. You know, they'll have their sort of downsides in terms of training, really. So what volunteers can so basically to increase the rigor of the survey. So part of this would be really great to have better equipment. So what I'm going to do is put together a list, and I've had a quick chat to Adam earlier in the summer about this, and I've probably been a bit slow on this, but basically put together an equipment list where we can basically improve, so potentially use it as an opportunity to get some funding in to get some equipment, and that will allow us to improve the accuracy of our results. It also allow us to ask a few different questions, so we can ask a few more detailed questions and maybe get some more interesting results. And also it'd be really nice if we could train our volunteers, so whether that's working with other organisations coming in and helping us, or working in-house, you know, it'd be really nice if we can train our volunteers so that they get the most out of the surveys, and then they get a skill as well at the same time. So I'm sort of coming to the end now, but I suppose the real take-home message is we're doing a fantastic job. Our woodland schemes are really effective. So we've got, you know, more than 90% survival of our tree species. We're associated with, you know, fantastic woodland flora. Woodland surveys are a really valuable volunteer experience. So they allow that connection with nature and that engagement, which is part of the reason that we exist as a charity. And most importantly, they're making a positive difference around Devon. So with these woodlands, you know, we're drawing down carbon, we're increasing the biodiversity, and we're connecting people with nature. And we're making our woodlands more resilient for the future. So we're doing good. So we're actually, you know, we're making a difference, and that ultimately is what it's all about. So basically, I want to say, sort of continue the good work. It's, I know it's, so when the going gets tough, just remember that, you know, you're making a real difference. So I want to say sort of thank you to all the volunteers and all the members for doing such, you know, hard work, and all the staff members as well. So anyway, that's it for me. So I just want to say thank you for listening.